The IRS just released the 2025 contribution limits for Health Savings Account, or HSA, and they do this around April or May of every year. And this is especially exciting for people like me on the financial independence journey because we are one of the 8% of Americans who treat the HSA like a Roth IRA or a separate retirement account. The HSA is arguably one of the most powerful tools or investment vehicles I invest in to achieve financial independence and have the possibility to retire early. And when I say I'm going to use HSA to fund my vacation trips in the future, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to show you how it works. And let me just show you what Fidelity said, which in my opinion is one of the best brokers that offers a health savings account. And I'm not sponsored by Fidelity. So starting on January 1st, 2025, the HSA contribution limit is going to be increased from $4,150 to $4,300 if you're a single individual, or from $8,300 to $8,550 if you're on a family plan. If you're over the age of 55, you get to contribute an additional $1,000 to your HSA. And keep in mind that an HSA is not the same as an FSA or a flexible spending account. These are two completely separate things. HSA allows you to roll your money over every year, and you get to invest in index funds like the S&P 500. You can't do that with an FSA. It's probably the most overlooked investment vehicle for people on the high deductible health plan. And before someone like David in the comment section complains about how an HSA should not be counted towards your savings rate, let me show you how it actually works for people on their FIRE journey. And I'm going to use the 2024 numbers for right now, since we're not even halfway into 2024 yet. And then I'll show you how the 2025 numbers will change. You have two ways to contribute to your HSA. One way is to come out directly out of your paycheck every 2 weeks, twice a month, or however you get paid from your job. And the other way is coming directly from your employer. Depending on your employer, they could give you a lump sum contribution at the beginning of the year or make small deposits every pay period. Having an employer contribution is really huge because then you wouldn't have to contribute as much if your employer contributes some. For example, if you're on a single plan with a maximum contribution limit of $4,150 and your employer contributes $500 to your HSA plan in the same year, then you only need to contribute up to $3,650 because the contribution limit is a combination of both you and your employer. That makes sense so far, right? Once the money goes into your HSA, you actually have two separate pots of money inside your HSA. And one of them is in cash, sitting in the HSA checking account, which is meant to be used to pay medical expenses. A lot of HSAs require you to have a minimum cash amount before you move it into your investment account. Optum Bank, for example, requires you to have a minimum of $2,000 in the checking account before you invest the rest. HSA Bank, on the other hand, I believe requires you to have $1,000 in your HSA checking account before you invest the rest into the HSA brokerage account managed by Schwab. You can transfer that cash from the HSA checking account to your personal checking account if you want to. But keep in mind that anytime you put money from your checking account to your HSA checking, it is going to be considered a contribution. You want to make sure that you don't go over the contribution limit, or you could be penalized by the IRS during the tax season. And once you reach the minimum cash threshold, you can invest in anything above that amount in the brokerage account. Some HSAs will have limited options for you to invest, but some HSAs like Fidelity and Schwab will give you a wide variety to choose from: individual stocks, ETFs, and mutual funds. Because HSA will grow tax-free. This is a great investment vehicle to invest in something that will be less tax efficient in a taxable brokerage account, because the dividends and capital gains will not be taxed under your HSA. So let me break it down for you a little bit further, okay? In the US tax system, it's called a progressive tax system, okay? For the longest time, I did not understand how any of it worked. Now, I just assumed that if I made $100,000 a year, then I have to pay 22 or 24% of my entire $100,000 income to the IRS. That's not the case at all. Most of you watching my channel will fall between 22 and 24% marginal tax rates if you're a single individual. But just remember that your first $11,000 will be taxed at 10%. Then your next $36,000 will be taxed at 12%. Then your next $53,000 will be taxed at 22%. And then your next $91,000 is taxed at 24%. It's the same system for married couples, but you'll significantly save more money on taxes. You see how the first three tax brackets right here, right, are nearly double from the ones filing taxes as a single individual, right? If you're married and filing taxes jointly, your marginal tax rate is only 22% if your income is under $200,000. By the way, did you know that over 50% of Americans who make over $100,000 a year are living paycheck to paycheck? So is it always an income problem or a spending problem? If you're having trouble figuring out your budget, I encourage you to download a budgeting app called YNAB. YNAB stands for You Need a Budget. That's right. Whether you make $50,000 a year or $300,000 a year, every one of you needs to create a budget to achieve financial independence. You need to give every dollar a job so that you can be more intentional with your savings and spending. You can get a free trial without any credit card information by using the link in the description below. Why am I showing you any of this? Because what I'm going to show you next will not make sense if you don't understand the US progressive tax system. Because depending on your income, you could have some significant tax savings using the HSA. Just keep in mind that this chart shows the whole numbers in the marginal tax rate. You could be someone sitting right in between 12 and 22% marginal tax rate or 22 and 24%. So you'll have to do some manual calculations to find out your total tax savings. If you're not sure how to do that, then you can schedule a consultation with me by visiting firesuture.com/coaching to find out how you can save taxes and retire early with your HSA. I just redid my entire website, so you're going to see some new features in there about how to become one of my private clients. So check it out when you get a chance. According to the most recent survey I did on my channel, most of you watch my videos are between 22 and 24% in marginal tax rate. If you're single, that $4,150 could save you almost $1,000 in total taxes in 2024, which could go right back into your pocket, right? Figuratively speaking. If you're on a HSA family plan right here, you could save almost $2,000 in taxes if your marginal tax rate is at 24%. So the bottom line is that every dollar I contribute to my HSA is going to be in pre-tax dollars. And this is going to be on top of the standard deduction of either $14,600 for singles or $29,200 for married couples. And these are your potential tax savings in 2025 with the new HSA contribution limits. And now it's changed to 2025, right? Your contribution limits is going to be increased by $150 if you're single or $250 if you're on a family plan. And feel free to take a screenshot of this if you want to. And when you get a chance, be sure to check out this video about what Congress is actually doing to make changes to the HSA. And they're actually all good stuff and not trying to take anything away. But with the new bill, they might allow everyone, even if they don't have a high deductible health plan, to own an HSA. And we'll see how that goes. But check that video out when you get a chance. But let me show you how my HSA calculator, which you can download for absolutely free by visiting firesuture.com/resources. I actually didn't start contributing to my HSA until January 2022 because my previous employer in the private sector didn't have a high deductible health plan available to their employees. But since then, I've been maxing out my HSA contributions in 2022, 23, and now in 24, even with a late start in my 30s. By age 65, where it's labeled blue, I would have $1.2 million invested in my HSA if it makes about 8% average annual return. And this calculator even allows you to add the employer contribution right here, okay? So if you're doing a family plan with a maximum contribution limit right here at $8,300, you would only need to contribute $7,300 if your employer contributes $1,000. So it's really important for you to find out what your employer contribution is going to be. You're not going to owe any taxes on your contribution or your employer's contribution. And the reason why age 65 is highlighted is because that's when HSA allows you to use every dollar you saved and invested in this account for anything. Before age 65, you can only use your HSA for qualified medical expenses, or you'll get penalized 20% by the IRS. But there's a way around it by reimbursing yourself in the future. So if you look on the far right side of the spreadsheet right here, you see all the highlighted green, right? This is not going to be available on the resources website. This is only for private clients, okay? This is how people on their FIRE journey keep track of their qualified medical, dental, and vision expenses. If my family, let's say, spends $3,000, okay, in total medical expenses this year, then we have all of those receipts scanned and saved so that we can reimburse ourselves at any time. There's no expiration date on when you need to get reimbursed as long as you keep the receipts. So let's say in 2024, it was $3,000. So I have $3,000 I can reimburse myself at any time. $3,000 from fixing my cavity, maybe getting a crown for one of my teeth, or maybe going to the ER or going to urgent care for anything that would be all reimbursable medical expenses under my HSA, but I'm not using that yet, right? So let's say I keep saving those receipts and I don't touch my HSA and spend a total of, let's say $27,000. Can you see that? Okay. So I'm going to highlight it there. Let's say I spent $27,000 by the time I turn 45. I could get reimbursed for that $27,000 for all the years I've been saving the receipts for my qualified medical expenses. That makes sense so far, right? I already prepaid my medical expenses. All of these reimbursements can be used for anything. And I could go on a vacation with pre-tax dollars in my HSA. And I could use it for home improvement if I want to. And I could even buy another property if I want to, truly. And I just have to keep track of how much I've spent so far. After I turn 65 down here, then none of this will matter because then I could use my HSA to pay for certain Medicare expenses and premiums because I'm going to be eligible for Medicare in the year I turn 65 years old. So knowing how expensive the healthcare system is in the US, having an HSA, it is going to be extremely, extremely helpful going into my early retirement. And let me show you the 3-bucket strategy for your HSA. Like I said earlier, HSA is not for everyone. You have to be ready to pay for your medical expenses now so that you don't touch your HSA. And if you have high medical expenses and you don't have enough cash to pay for them right now, then the HSA might not be right for you, okay? So I have 3 accounts. I have my HSA right here, which goes into the index funds every single month. I don't touch it because I treat this like my Roth IRA and 401k. This is the investment account that could grow into 7 figures when I reach my retirement age. I can also reimburse myself at any time out of this account by saving all of the medical receipts. However, if I take any money out of my HSA now, I'm going to end up losing out on the compound interest, right? So in order to prevent touching any money in my HSA, I have a high yield savings account or HYSA that stores my cash to pay for any expected expenses. And I label this account the annual expenses account. For example, I just paid about $180 in copay for my dental appointment last month. That came straight out of my annual expenses fund instead of my HSA. I just paid $70 on prescription medication because I knew that's how much it costs at the pharmacy under the high deductible health plan. But what if I had a medical emergency? This is where the 3rd bucket, my emergency fund, comes in. It's not cheap to go to the ER or urgent care under the high deductible health plan. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. That's truly the downside of having an HSA. When I spent $2,000 on an ER visit a few months ago, I used my emergency fund because it was more than what I had in my 2nd bucket, my annual expenses fund, right? Since I always have at least 6 months of expenses set aside in my emergency fund, I just spend the next month or so replenishing my emergency fund. But this is what I always recommend to have: an annual expenses fund that will pay for your expected or known medical expenses for the year, and have a fully funded emergency fund that will pay for your unexpected or unknown medical expenses. And here's a pro tip for you. If you ever come across a huge medical expense and you have the cash to pay for it in full, you'll need to call the medical administration or administrator to ask for a discount before you pay it in full. You'd be surprised to know that they will give you a 10 to 20% discount for paying off the full balance. We get the discount probably about 9 times out of 10. And keep in mind that they'll only offer a discount if you pay it in full, because they would rather not send that to a collection or put it into a debt. They would rather collect that cash from you now, right? And if you're brand new to the FIRE movement, take a look at my FIRE checklist by visiting firesector.com/resources. And HSA is on step 6, right after paying off your high interest debt and fully funding your emergency fund. I do not ever recommend saving your HSA until you have the cash reserve to pay for your known and unknown medical expenses now. You need to have a mattress to create a cushion between you and the floor, right? And the mattress is your cash reserve so that you don't go back into debt again. And as soon as you start treating your HSA like a Roth IRA, you're going to have the peace of mind to pay for your Medicare premiums, expenses, and prescription medications when you're retired, say when you're 65 years old. Even if you can't save 7 figures in your HSA, having 6 figures or even 5 figures is far more than the rest of 90%, 93% of Americans with an HSA. This is your time to win and your time to take control of your finances. And this has been another beast of a video, and I hope you got a lot out of it.